Hi, it's Ewan Ellery here making bonsai in Australia, and in this video I'm going to be going over what I've learned in my last couple of years making bonsai. So in this channel I've been bringing people along with me in my journey in developing bonsai, but I started out really from nothing, and it's been a bit of a journey over the last couple of years in getting a bit of an understanding of how bonsai work, how they grow, numerous different strategies for that, and then putting it into practice, given that there is a big difference depending on what kind of climate you're in and the trees you're working with and so forth. So through this video you'll get a bit of info and hopefully help you along your own journey. But I do really target my channel at people who are fresh to their bonsai journey. If that is you, this might be of some value, but let me know in the comments below if there is anything in particular you'd like me to cover in future videos. So when I first started out on my bonsai journey, this was actually the second video that I had made, the first steps in starting to grow this as a bonsai. The reason why I kind of wanted to show you this one, it's kind of consistent with the guava. So the guava and this, I pruned them both back really quite severely, harsh root pruning. And then, basically just pruned it back to nothing. The guava I left a little bit more. And look, I kind of wanted to go over the reasons as to why. So when I was first kind of getting into bonsai, I was watching a lot of the Bonsai Zone. So Nigel Saunders, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his content, a lot of good content there. So check it out if you're interested. But I was watching a lot of his content, and he does a lot of really pruning back the roots, which I still definitely do, but also really pruning back because he does go for a very clip and grow style approach on his bonsai. And look, that's a very fine strategy, and a very fine strategy if you've got years to play with. But what I've kind of learned from it is, look, I pruned this back, and then I've probably been a little bit too aggressive with follow-up prunings on specifically some of my earlier bonsai. So pruned it back really hard, put it into this, didn't put it into a pot to get new vigor and to get more healthy. So really restrained it in this pot, and it's been in this for a couple of years, hasn't had a lot of growth. It's kind of had a few shoots that have gone up, so straight shoots, and I've wanted it to bud back and get a bit of extra branching. So I pruned it back a few times, and it's not really taken off. So wanted to bring up this because this and the guava have kind of had the same treatment where I've pruned them both back, and they're both not really doing that well. The guava is now doing quite fine, but that's because I've put it in a place where it's actually got the roots growing into the soil, and I haven't pruned it in a long time. But initially some of my early videos was really kind of limiting the tree and really limiting how much room for growth it had by pruning it back before it could get vigorous, and by keeping it in a small pot. So after this video, I'll be sleeve potting this into a larger pot. But what I was really doing early days was pruning everything back. So really hard pruning to the roots and really hard pruning up above, just so I could get that natural taper over time. But I guess one of the things that I'm starting to learn is, that's fine. It's a very good strategy if you're happy to put the time into it over time, but it really does limit the overall growth. So if you are targeting more developed and more mature kind of trees in a short time frame, it's probably not the best strategy. So I'll get into that more a little bit further on. So here are a couple of other examples of some bonsai that I've done a couple of years ago now. So I think it's actually almost been maybe a year and a half or so since I did these. But I wanted to show these in particular because so I did the one video on, there were 3 of these that I did the video on. All 3 have survived. I only got these 2 because one of them was actually look, this one looks like it's almost dead. It's actually starting to come good now, but it was even in a worse state than this as of about a few months ago. So I actually sleeve potted it into another pot, into a much larger pot, which is sitting in my backyard, and it's actually doing really well now, so a lot more vigorous than this one. But that's kind of why I wanted to go into it. So it's been a while since I potted these into the same pots. But as you can see, so this one is actually doing fairly well. Not nowhere near as much vigor as I would ideally like to see, but it's actually, you know, there's growth there. But this one, yeah, so you can see some little, so that little branch holding in front of me there, that in the center of the screen, that's nice and green, but the rest of it, it's really struggled. So it's starting to come back now. You know, it's mid-spring now, so it's starting to get a little bit of growth, but really having difficulty. And this is kind of what I've found consistent with, yes, a lot of my kind of early approaches. You know, and it was a lot of trial and error for me, because I need to find out, you know, what kind of trees I can actually work with, how severely I can prune them back and have them survive in my local environment. So yeah, had a lot of junipers a number of junipers that I've worked with over the years, and I've actually had a couple of them die. Purely because, I was kind of pruning back too severely and wasn't as experienced. So it's kind of one of those things over the years, you get an understanding of what trees you can work with and how harshly you can kind of treat them and have them bounce back. But yeah, both of these have survived. But again, a scenario where if I'd had them in a larger pot, they'd probably be doing quite well, especially given the one that was doing the worst out of these is now doing best since it's been moved into a different pot. But we'll get further into that later. So that was my kind of early days in bonsai with those pieces. So fortunately, over the years, I've had over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to start getting in and starting to work on a lot more varieties and a lot more developed specimens, which it's a really good opportunity for me, especially just to get kind of the experience working with more developed trees, because you know there's a big difference between that and trying to start the initial development. So yeah, recently just started getting more mature trees. There's a few other trees that I've got at about this maturity, but as you can see, I'm only just really starting to get to the stage where I'm really getting these branch pads. And that's just because of, I guess, how new I am to this kind of journey. So, definitely going to have more potential there with time. So now that I've given you a bit of an intro there in terms of, you know, where I've come so far, now I'll go into some of the specifics of what I've actually learned so far. So probably the main thing that I've taken away from this, and look, I've set this with the context going into this as well, that these are learnings that I've had, learnings that I've taken from my journey over the last couple of years. And look, they're going to be specific to me, but hopefully you can take something from it. So the main thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is that there is a massive difference between keeping bonsai alive and keeping them vigorous. So that's where I touched on earlier with these trees, in the sense of, look, I'd always been very confident starting out in bonsai, because I've always been pretty good at, you know, growing. As a kid, used to have a couple garden beds that I'd spend a bit of time in, so I'd be growing plants and trees as a kid, as it were. So I was very confident in my capacity to kind of keep trees alive. And that's where, with these ones, kind of a lot of these earlier trees, pruning them back really severely. Same with this bougainvillea, because I was confident that I could keep them alive. But where the difference is there is that, whilst I can keep them alive, I've come to the understanding over the last couple of years that I really want to focus a lot more at getting a lot more vigor, so that they're a lot more impressive over a couple of years to come. And I've kind of come to that understanding because I've trialed a few different things with different trees. So I've had some trees like these ones where I've kind of, pruned them back quite severely, and I've had other ones where I've let them grow and prune them back less severely, and I've seen those really take off and look a lot more impressive in comparison over the last couple of years. So obviously one of the main things there is the fact that, you know, what I've called out so far, and the fact that I'm really kind of restricting them in these pots. So look, there's a lot of different things that I can highlight, and look, I do have another video which I'll leave a link for up above, which you can check that out, where I go into details in terms of what you can do if you do want to develop really thick trunked bonsai. So definitely, yeah, different things that you can approach in terms of planting it in larger pots, planting it in the soil, growing sacrificial branches. All of those really do come into play. And that also links into what I've mentioned already insofar as the pruning approach. So how severely am I pruning things? So definitely with pruning the roots, you know, there are some species that I've found where it's safer for me to be a little bit more conservative with the root pruning. So there's definitely been kind of learnings with that over the years, like azaleas, for instance. I've struggled a lot more keeping azaleas alive than I have with others. But in general, happy with my approach for root pruning. It keeps them safe for me. One thing that I've probably decided to tone down a little bit more in the last couple of years is just the severity of the pruning, kind of how harshly am I pruning. Another component there is really the positioning, kind of where you have your tree. So let's say, for instance, the Japanese juniper. So these really do like, yeah, a lot of sun. When you've got a lot of sun though, you do need to water it slightly more. And given that I have big days at work, I tend to leave this one not in the most sunny position, just so that it doesn't get too taxed, especially being in a deep pot, just so it doesn't get too taxed through the day. And that seems to work really well for it. Same with, so this for instance likes it really sunny, also likes to be able to dry out, so it's fine having it in those in those positions where it does get the brunt of the sun through the day, or at least that's what I found. But there's also shades, so certain trees, let's say for instance my dwarf schefflera. So dwarf scheffleras, they like a fair bit of sun, but they don't really like so much of the really hot afternoon sun. So for them, I've kind of positioned them in a place where it gets the morning sun, but not the afternoon sun. So you need to find these kind of things for you, depending on what you're growing and the environments they like. And another thing, and probably seeming obvious, but that's fertilizer. So look, over the last couple of years, I've moved house a little bit, and well, since I started growing bonsai, I've moved house twice, let's put it that way. The first was a really small unit, had a really small balcony out the back, got a little bit of sun, so yeah, it was all kind of growing fairly well. But then I moved to a place with a lot more room, so I had, you know, a lot more setup, could get more plants, really started to get more. But the problem with that place was that because it was a townhouse, and yeah, just the way of the everything was kind of set up, it really hardly got any sun. So there was probably like a window of about 1 or 2 hours through the day where I actually got good sunlight on my trees. And over that period of time, I really noticed that I wasn't getting hardly any growth. So recently moved into a different area, and it's been fantastic, especially as soon as I started really focusing on getting a bit of fertilizer on there, so liquid fertilizer, and the little things you can just throw down, it really started to improve. So those are probably the basics, and look, I'm trying to kind of cover a lot of these things in one individual video, and I do try to go into the specifics depending on the specific tree that I'm working on in my individual videos. So yeah, if I don't cover things here, it should be covered in other videos, and if not, please just leave a comment and let me know what you want me to cover. So yeah, I've also done quite a bit of experimenting over the last couple of years. So look, a lot of that I haven't actually included on my channel. Most of it's been offline, but a lot of it's been to do with trying to grow things from cuttings, root cuttings, air layerings. So yeah, so far I've had a lot of success with propagation. So in terms of cuttings, Cuttings, I've had a lot of success. Brick cuttings, I've had a lot of success. Air layering, I probably shouldn't say I've had success. Air layering, I did an early video on my Brazilian cherry where I tried to do air layering. It didn't really work so well. Very rudimentary materials that I was trying to use, yeah, just didn't work. Just recently I did a video where I air layered one of my Japanese maples, and since then I've also air layered 2 lily pillies in my backyard, so hopefully I'll be able to yeah, do a bit of a video on successful air layering soon to come, but yeah, we're still seeing how that goes. But yeah, a lot of those kind of experiments over the years that I have been trying to introduce just to get a little bit more familiar with some of these other bonsai strategies. Alright, so moving forward, what have I taken from these learnings? So I think I've kind of briefly mentioned a few things, but yeah, in the most part, look, predominantly a lot less clip and grow. So whilst, for instance, this tree here is still very much clip and grow, so you can actually see, and I did a video on this about 6 months ago, and it was one that was actually grown very thick. There was an air layering taken off of it, and then it's been kind of pruned back, and I'd kind of cut this back quite severely, and it's naturally kind of rotted, so getting quite a good kind of look from this. But yeah, in general, I'm going to steer away from clip and grow in the sense of what I had been doing, where I'd been pruning everything back very severely and just letting it grow from the start, just to get a lot more vigor in my trees. Enough said. So yeah, the strategy is going to be a lot more letting things grow and then cutting it back to taper, you know, so that I can keep the styling and shape of a tree rather than just having it look like a stump 9 times out of 10. Yeah, look, definitely still going to be things that I'm experimenting on in the future. So yeah, as I've mentioned, you know, with the trying to get successful at air layering, but also things like overwintering. So for instance, last winter, so because I have moved house just recently, and where I was in the centre of Brisbane, so through winter, you know, the coldest it would get overnight would normally be around 6 degrees Celsius, so still, you know, nowhere near freezing. But having moved out here to Springfield, which is still Queensland, not that far away, but significantly colder overnight, and seemingly significantly warmer through the day. So yeah, as a result, through winter was consistently getting down to, you know, teetering on the edge of freezing, which is really not great for a lot of my ficuses. And being in Brisbane, quite a tropical area, pretty big on ficuses. So yeah, it was a little bit of a hard hit for some of my ficuses, and they really don't do well in freezing. And this one in particular actually lost all of its leaves. So yeah, starting to come back now, doing fine, but definitely going to have to think about what I'm going to be doing specifically for my ficuses through winter. But I'm also really keen on checking out a couple of the local bonsai clubs, just to kind of get in a little bit more with the local culture and kind of see what's out there, who's out there in the local area. But look, that's all for this video today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so that you're notified of my future videos when I release them. But look, thanks for your time today. Enjoy. Bye.